So I don't know if we'll be able to get to that for 2.2, so I might have to wait for after that, but we'll see. Okay, so you mean like functionally for the Venator Parrot? I've played older versions of the games, and I've loved how the unit was balanced in the way that it spat out fighters, but at the time frame. Yeah, so the actual function of the Venator is the same in that it's a primarily a carrier that has some weapon capabilities, but well, Michael, the precursor, like I said, will be in other factions, so you'll get your wish there. How will each warlord differ in playstyle from what I've observed? Seems Raidu is more frigate-based, while Maldrud has an emphasis on cruisers, while Zsinj is a proper mix of Imperial CSA. Well, Zsinj, you're basically seeing how they are, so that is what it is. Maldrud is actually more focused on smaller ships like frigates and cruisers. The biggest stuff they have access to is stuff like the Allegiance and the Secutor, which will be a bit more limited for them, and they don't get SSD access. Raidu actually gets access to a lot more larger stuff than other factions. They were one of the few warlord groups that actually did produce their own SSD, which was Nighthammer. I think we actually talked about that. That was in the chat room last time people were talking about that? I'm not sure. But that's generally how it works. Crap. I'm not sure if Maldrud is or if Kashyyyk is actually attached to any of their planets because the travel routes are sort of weird in that area. But I'll have to check when we get back to the map. I'm going to take a look at the collision mesh for the LAAT after this as well. So that ship should be destroyed, or that latch should be getting hit by a lot of this. How common are crashes to be expected when playing ICW? Pretty much never. There was one known crash issue with 2.1 where if you changed eras after having destroyed another faction, the game would crash because it was trying to spawn things in for a group that no longer existed, so it didn't know where to put them. But that was actually even fixed in a patch. So as it stands, we're not actually aware of any crashing issues in the mod.
Destination set. Armored transport ready.
You're not finished yet. Haha, I can take advantage of it.
Reporting in. Destination set.
Talco, if you post on the forums, I'm not going to try to debug it during a stream, but if you post on the forums what's happening when you crash, like what you're actually doing, I can try to figure out whether something might be installed incorrectly or what might be going on with what you're experiencing there, but as a result, the big GCs are unwinnable. Yeah, so part of the way we fixed it for 2.1 was that we just added in some extra planets to the to the GCs as sort of a
Target acquired.
like a I guess failsafe or
Weapons
a
Walker moving
sort of overload thing, which does mean that if you do conquer all the planets in the GC that you can see, there's still some that you can't actually conquer, but
attack.
once you have everything, you'll sort of know, I won. But in 2.2, we've done it a different way, so we've removed those sort of overflow planets
Right away.
and done it by
Moving out.
changing the story scripting. So it'll be a bit more user-friendly in that way in 2.2.
Open fire.
Excuse my ignorance, but which forms? The actual Thrawn's Revenge site ones. There's a tech support section in the Imperial Civil War area.
Attacking target. Fire at will. Attacking. I copy. Targeting. Let's go.
So
Firing. Reporting. Target acquired. Keep going.
and people have been asking, what's an ATTE versus an ATAT? And there you go.
Commencing attack.
Run available.
Ready to receive orders. Acknowledged. Destination set.
Cancelled.
Proceeding to target.
Ghost Sniper, in most cases, that's actually because of the inaccuracy versus air units,
To attack.
as opposed to collision mesh issue. But the LAT I do know has the LAT and IDT have smaller collision meshes because they had issues because of friendly fire where they'd shoot themselves if their collision meshes were too big. So they actually are a bit smaller than they should be, and I'm going to take a look again at fixing that.
Open fire.
But do the Pentastars still get the Republican CIS tech, or has that changed? They still do get some of it, but a lot of the CIS tech was through the corporate sector, which is now only available to Zsinj.
Ready. Attack back.
So they won't be getting that anymore, but they're still getting a lot of the older Imperial or Republic tech.
AT-AT ready. Armor transport ready. Attacking target. Fire at will.
What other ground changes? Well, there's the once they're finished, the turrets on buildings for one thing. We're also trying to. We tried to go with some of the smaller maps so it doesn't turn into such a slugfest. We've reverted the changes to combat speed, where units used to go really fast, to which we originally did to compensate for the fact that the maps were too big.
Target acquired. Commencing attack. Weapons armed.
Like the CIS and Republic tech is being distributed based on
Targeting
what would have been available where and what would have been sort of more prevalent there. Like it's already way more prevalent in the mod than it should be.
awaiting
But so like because the Pentastar alignment control is munificient or
right away.
munilinst, they get the munificient, and because like the Empire used a lot of old Republic tech in a lot of backwater areas, there's a bigger mix of like older Republic tech or early Empire stuff for the
We'll clear the way
for Maldrude, Zsinj, and the Pentastar alignment, because those are sort of like the outer rim territories or the colonies as opposed to the core. Whereas Aridu is a lot more core based, so they tend to get a lot more of the standard Imperial stuff that you'd expect with like SSDs and later Imperial tech.
Choose your reinforcements.
On my way, sir.
Bombardment available.
So yeah, the turrets do work. It's just some funkiness with how they're positioned right now that sort of makes them not want to fire in most cases. Which I'm just sort of working on fixing that at the moment. Or that's what I was doing last night. But question about NR Heroes for Art of War. Will Lusenki only be available for eras 4 and 5 instead of 3? Yeah, so it'll only be in era 4 that you're able to actually build it. Or that you're able to use it. We might make it so that you can recruit it. You can start recruiting it in era 3, but we'll see. It'll likely be a hero that you do have to recruit, and not one that you just get automatically. Yeah, so that's why Kashyyyk wasn't getting taken. It's only connected to my planet Portus Vita and my other planets.
Construction complete.
Yes, Slorny, they will be hard points. I might even get you to help me with them. But yeah, so the whole Era 2 Lusenkia, that's not going to be a thing anymore. Wedge is still going to be with his appropriate fighter squadron heroes until that point. Because it was only in Era 4 or 5 that the New Republic even really started thinking about, like, hey, we need SSDs. Because of all the Dark Empire shenanigans. But it'll probably end up being a thing that you can get as early as Era 4, but is more of an Era 5 thing. Well, I still controlled the planet.
Construction complete.
So I don't think they would have... I think I still did. So I don't think they would have been able to actually get over there. So Thanos is actually the main... Thanos and the Roche asteroid fields are actually the main shipyards of the Greater Maldrude. So the fact that we took those from them, good stuff. I'm just going to get a Quasar so you can see the new model for that. Well, it's not really a new model, it's been in ascendancy for a year, but whatever. Do we have any gladiators? Let's make some gladiators.
In production. Construction complete.
5 of them.
Training troops. Recruitment cancelled.
Alright.
Nebulon B frigate here.
Oops. That was not what I wanted to do. I mean, that would explain why we have it connected to so many weird things. Like, the way I think of the way I had it, Slorny.
Nebulon B frigate here.
Was Thanos up here, but okay, what is up with the VSD-1's depictions? I've seen so many sources where the VSD-1 can open and fold its winglets. Okay, so if you actually look at the canon depictions of the VSD, those wings don't open anywhere. I've never seen them open in any official depictions. Like, if you look in the actual edges of them, they're trenched the same way the rest of the ISD is. So I'm not sure where that comes from. It's usually just because that's how the Warlords models did it, and that's what a lot of EAW mods base it off of. But that's... like, Rise of the Mandalorians and Republic at War don't really make as much of an attempt to go for canon stuff as we do. So, hold on, I'm just going to look it up. Alright, where are those ground units? So I'm not sure if we'll have enough from just that to conquer... Okay, so actually with the IDTs, ATTEs, Raptor Troopers and that stuff, should be good. Like, they're called maneuvering fins, which made people decide, hey, let's make them open and close, but... And yeah, the Cronus thing is an issue with... that's just a text description mistake that we need to fix. Because Cronus wasn't part of Pterodox forces. Have you ever thought of doing more of a storyline-based GC like AOTR? Well, we've already started implementing a lot more story events into the mod. We've described them in the news posts about the eras. So, for example, there's the Back to War GC where you're trying to get rid of the Kratos virus. And then Art of War, you've already got all the era progression and all that, and there's going to be more like sub-events added in that. One of the bigger difficulties with having heavily scripted stuff is that, like we've mentioned, EAW doesn't allow you to use story scripting for factions beyond the first 3 for most things. Like any sort of multimedia event you can sort of fudge in by putting it in for an AI faction, then it'll still display for the player. But stuff like spawning units, locking units, spawning heroes, none of that can be done with like the Pentastar alignment, Zsinj, Maldruid, Raidu, Hapes, Duskin League, any of that. So we're trying to work it in where it's possible, but because we have more factions than the base game had, it makes it slightly less feasible in some areas. And the bigger the GC and the more factions it has, the less feasible that becomes, because you're sort of relying on certain factions doing certain things to certain other factions for them, whereas you never really know if there's 8 factions playing on the GC and there's like 90 planets. You never know who at what point is going to control what, so it has to be a bit more internal to the faction. So stuff like for Era 4 and 5, for example, rather than having Dala just sort of spawn as an Era 5 hero for Pelion, she'll give her speech about how she's giving up control of the Remnant, and then after a timer in game, instead of just being Era 4, now Era 5, so Dala comes in the Scylla Venator, it'll instead be Era 4 turns to Era 5, like 20 galactic weeks passed, and then Dala comes back with another speech, brings you the replacement Warlord stuff, that sort of thing. And then there's other stuff like after this will just be an era specific one, but after Palpatine dies in what's it called, Operation Shadowhand, we plan to have it so that the Empire fractures again and the Warlords are sort of like emergent factions. And there's some stuff we'll have to do to get that to work, but that's essentially the kind of thing we're looking at here. As far as difference between VST 1 and 2, like physically, I'm pretty sure it's just different weapon systems.
As you wish, General. Ready. Right away.
Like, I've never seen a reliable difference between them visually. I never got that Dala goes from Nighthammer to a Venator. How does that happen? Well, the Nighthammer was destroyed, so there's that.
Right away, sir.
Like, I'm pretty sure the Nighthammer is the one...
AT-AT ready.
I might be... Like, I know this definitely happened to it, but I'm not sure if this is how it was destroyed. But from what I remember, one of the Jedi Luke was training, like Dorsk 81 or something, went and ended up, like, chucking the Nighthammer into a black hole. Or like there was some weird shenanigans that went on with the Nighthammer. Okay, right. It was the attack on Yavin. So the Nighthammer got destroyed. Dallas sort of failed at destroying the New Republic. She's like, "Oh, I'm leaving. Pelion, you take over." And that's when she went off to sort of lead the replacement warlords. So she ended up essentially doing the same thing she did before, and she started like the Maw regular fleet and all that stuff based out of the Maw. But then she came back to help Pelion with some other campaigns before disappearing again.
I copy.
And then she went off. The next time she came back was like the Legacy of the Force stuff, when Pelion asked for her to come back yet again. There was they just sort of say in the source material that she came back with a bunch of like older tech that had been sort of modified. So we said, well, in that case, Venator seems to work the best for it. But yeah, it was never... Just based on the sort of shit she turned up with
Reporting in.
and left with, we decided Venator made the most sense in that context.
Reinforcements cancelled.
Reporting.
Bombing run available. We've secured a landing zone.
I can't...
Roger that.
There was the Venator and there was one other ship we were considering for it.
Let's move out. Let's go.
Because at the time we didn't have a lot of the other frigates that we have now, like the Precursor and whatnot, but I seem to remember us having... We were deciding between the Venator and one other thing. Like, I know the Acclamator we always thought would be too weak for it. It's bothering me that I can't remember it now.
Armor ready. Moving to position. Moving.
It might have been a VST, but I don't think so.
Copy.
It was something else random.
Keep going.
Did I veto that?
Secured a landing zone.
If I did veto that, I shouldn't have vetoed that. Because that actually makes sense.
Just give me a target. On my way. I copy.
Order acknowledged. Move out.
Reporting. This way. Over there. Yes, sir. Yes, Commander. Affirmative, sir.